Don't try it at home. All right. So we are going through the book of James. We're memorizing a particular verse. Does anybody know what it is? James chapter 2, 14 to 17. So if you guys want to say it with me, you guys fixing that? Thanks. All right. Here's what it says. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, be warmed and filled," without giving him the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also, faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. And one of the reasons we picked that verse is because we're talking about faith that works. And a lot of times what we think about is in the Christian life, we do the work, and because we do the work, Jesus accepts us, and that's not how it works. The faith that works is faith in Jesus who's already done the work, and because he's already done the work and earned everything for us, we're free to fail. We're also free to serve. Okay, so you can see on your note sheet if you're following along, it's in your chair, or you can follow along on YouVersion. That's an app that you can have on your phone. The Wi-Fi is Discovery Church Wi-Fi, and the password to it is Discovery with a capital D and a capital Y. And if you're following along, you can see that the question we're going to be asking is, who do you think you are? But I figure since Halloween's coming up in a few days, let's check a few people and see if you can figure out who they think they are. Who do they think they are? Yeah, creepy Bert and Ernie, right? Like, scary, okay? Who does this guy think he is? Yeah, Walking Dead Homer Simpson. Okay, how about this one? Oh yeah. I'm in between like grossed out and like super impressed. Okay, how about this one? What? Hey, look, I found a box. I think I'll wear it. I don't even know what that is. Okay, but here I want to show you one of somebody who really tried, and there's a problem with that. Do or do not. There is no try. Yes. Do or do not. There is no try. So, with that in mind, let's read the verses that we're going to be going through today. It's James chapter 4, and we're going to be doing 11 through 17. So let me just read this to you. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law, but a judge. There's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So the question that we're asking, and the way that James is talking here, he's talking to people who are behaving certain ways, and it's almost like he's saying, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You judge people. You criticize people. You speak evil against other people. You have plans that you're going to go do stuff, and you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. Who are you? And it's a fair enough question to ask when things appear like they're not going right. Okay, so anybody who's ever had somebody talk back to them or disrespect them, you may not have said this, but you probably looked at them like, who do you think you are? Because you recognize that there's some disconnect here. Like, you should not be acting like that. You should not be talking like that. Who do you think you are? So this is kind of where James is coming from here. And so in the first couple verses, there's a question that we're going to ask about who do you think you are. So look at just verse 11 and 12, okay? Don't speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you're not a doer of the law. You're a judge. But there's only one lawgiver and judge who's able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? So those verses there are basically, here's what I'm wondering. Do you think that you're better than? Do you think that you're better than people? This is kind of the question we need to ask ourselves. Do you think that you're better than people? Because he speaks evil against the law and judges the law is basically saying that you're setting yourself above the law. And so here's what it boils down to. We look around at people and how they behave and the things that we do, and we judge them according to how we practice the law. And so what we end up doing is we say, I would never do that. And so we have people in this room, some who are rule followers, and they're type A, and they just, this is what you're supposed to do, so you need to do it. And then there's others, we're just free spirits, and it's like, what'd you say? Sorry, I forgot. And then we do it. Well, the ones who are very organized and scheduled and type A and like things in order and like to know, they just follow rules because that's what you do. Yes, I'm looking at some of you. That's because you're not in that group, Ralph. Okay. I'm thinking of somebody else, but I won't say their name. And so when somebody makes a mistake, as a matter of fact, I'll just use me as an example, okay? When I think I'm better. Like, I'm one of those people who has kind of a memory, and I can see something on a list. I know exactly where it is on the list, and I'll remember. I don't need the list. I can just see it. I know where it is, and I'll just kind of picture it in my head and go, oh, yeah, don't forget to pick up taco shells and toothpaste, and what else is that? Fried onions. Okay. Like, weird, right? Who would ever be, there's no association there, but they're on the list. I can remember it. And then there's other people who, that's not how it works. And so you can send one of those other people from my house to the store, and they have the list. And they go through, and they're like, okay, taco shells, toothpaste. And then because they're by the toothpaste, they're like, I need some shampoo. And so they pick up some shampoo, which gets them to think that maybe I need to pick up some cat litter, and it moves them to a whole other place, and they totally miss out. I don't know what they're picking up. You know, it's just whatever. I'm making up the story because I'm trying not to give away names to protect the innocent. And they come home, and they haven't gotten that third thing, the fried onions. And so I judge them. I'm like, how could you forget it? It was right on the list. It's right there. You had the list. I don't even need the list. I could have gone to the store and remembered these things. Okay, this is what it's talking about. And so when we look at people around our churches, around our neighborhoods, at our jobs or whatever, when we look and we see the things that they aren't doing that we would never do or that we would always get right, and we judge them, we are doing exactly what James is talking about. We're speaking evil against one another. And when we speak evil and we judge the other brother, we speak evil against them, and we're judging according to our observance of the law and not theirs. And so if we would devote ourselves to actually just obeying the word and not investigating and doing a little background check on everybody else to see if they're doing it, we wouldn't have nearly the troubles that we do in our churches. We wouldn't be nearly as frustrated with other people as we are. So what is this law that he's talking about judging? Okay? What is this law? Don't speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. What is the law? Okay, well, if you remember, there's a little story. Jesus is having a conversation in Matthew chapter 22, and somebody asks him, what's the most important law? It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it to, anybody know? Love your neighbor as yourself. And so if you're sitting there judging your neighbor going, I would never do that. I can't believe you did that. Wow, you're horrible. How could you do that? Then you're judging the law, and you're judging the law that says love your neighbor as yourself, and you're not loving your neighbor as yourself. That's basically what he's talking about. And so what do you think you do if you think you're better than others? If you're constantly judging others by your own standard, what are you supposed to do? Well, I'm going to put it in the terms that James uses. Here's what you need to do. If you find yourself doing that, either occasionally or regularly, you and I need to stop being evil. Because that's what he calls it when we speak this way. In verse 11, don't speak evil against one another. You're spewing evil. We need to stop this. And you speak evil against the law, and you judge the law, and it's not just against our neighbors, it's against God himself. And so we need to stop being evil. So how do you do that? There's a few things. I'll just give you a couple. Like if you look at verse 11, stop speaking evil to your brothers. I think that kind of boils down to stop spending all your time being a critic. Okay? It's okay to be critical and be a critical thinker. It's not okay to be a critic. It's not okay. Because all you do is look for what's wrong. And sometimes we get in those little trenches, when things don't go the way that we want them. So say you go to work and you're already having a bad day because of something that happened before you got there, and then your boss does something, and the next thing you know, there's something scheduled on a day that you were supposed to be off, and pretty soon everybody's just ticking you off that day. And so it doesn't matter who comes in. He's like, oh, they're so stupid. Yeah. Stop being such a critic. Stop speaking evil. In verse 12, there's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and destroy. Did you catch that? Like, the one lawgiver and judge is the one who can save or destroy. Okay? You can't. God can save or he can destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? And so we shouldn't be critics because we're not the judge. That's really kind of what it boils down to. Stop being a critic because you're not the judge. Stop being evil if you think you're better than other people. Because here's what I know. Jesus came so that he could show that he is better than all of us, and we don't have to try. Like, he set us free from that. He's made us better. He's made us better. We'll talk about that in just a second. So you look at verses 13 through 17, the rest of it. It's like, hey, you guys say today or tomorrow we're going to go to a town, we're going to spend a year there, we're going to make some money. You don't even know how long your life's going to last. Like, your life's a mist. And he talks about that, and he says, instead, what you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. But you boast, and you're arrogant. So whoever knows the right thing to do and yet doesn't do it, or fails to do it, for him, it's sin. Now, I look at this and I think of, there's plenty of people that I know who make plans, who have ideas, who have schedules. They've got to keep. Everything goes in their digital brain or their daytime or whatever it is. They just, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I remember my dad. He wanted to retire early. He set a goal. He's like, I want to retire by the time, what was it, 45 you wanted to retire by? 50, he wanted to retire by the time he was 50. Okay. No, he still hasn't because he can't just sit still. Okay? I didn't get any of that from him. Okay? I'm happy to just sit and watch some television or something. My wife is more like my dad. Exactly. That's why I have no hair here, because, if I just, seriously, you guys, you see this? See that? See that? Smooth? It's really smooth. It's because I'm always doing this. Okay? So I keep my thin physique. Okay? But there are a lot of people, this is totally opposite of last week when I said I was fat and somebody said, you need a cheeseburger. So that made me feel happy. I brought it home. I showed my kids who make fun of me all the time. It's like, hey, flubs. That's what they call me. I'm like, I am not. Somebody else thinks I need a cheeseburger. Anyway, it has nothing to do with it. Sorry. So maybe you're like these people James is talking about, where you've got plans. You're going to go off to another city and make money. You think things are going to work out your way, and you're not saying, well, if the Lord wills, you're like, no, I'm going to do it, whether he wills or not. Well, here's the question. I don't know if this is the right word. It's the best I could come up with, but I'm really wondering, do you really think that you're prepared? Do you really think that you're prepared? I've got this plan. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be out of debt by this time. I'm going to get this job by this time. I'm going to finish school by this time. I'm going to be married, have this many kids, do these many things, blah, 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 blah. You think you're prepared. You're ready. You're planned. You got it together. You got it all figured out. Well, let me just tell you something, and it's something that happened to our friend Ralph back here. Okay, those of you who are part of Discovery, he threw something on Group Me yesterday. Anybody remember what it said? It was basically like, hey, it's been a rough week. Because on Monday, Ralph is driving. He's just making a U-turn by the Sonic on Memorial Drive, and he stops, and the other car doesn't, and goes through the intersection and gets plowed and flipped over, and the person who's in that car died. I'm pretty sure that wasn't their plan. And then a few days later, Ralph's back home, only to find out that the neighbor across the street, the 21-year-old son, his sister came home and found him dead. They don't know. They don't anticipate or expect that it was suicide. They think it was literally some medical anomaly. 21 years old, that wasn't on his list of things to do. Mom and Dad were not expecting to, right before Halloween and the holidays to have to bury their son. But they probably thought they were prepared. You're never prepared for stuff like this. What is your life? It's just a mist. And then he gets a call from his old boss. And his old boss called to tell him that his father passed. And so within a week, people, just in one person in here, and I'm sure you guys have stories too, but just one person from this room has had 3 people completely unprepared, and the world's just changed. And so do you really think you're prepared? I remember a friend of mine in high school. His name was Kevin Overgaard. His dad was a doctor. And I remember Kevin thought for a while that he wanted to be a doctor, okay? And so he did studying, and he thought he was prepared. He talked to his dad. Hello, Dad comes home every day, tells stories, this and that. He's like, Dad, I think I'd like to go, and see some of the stuff that you do. And so Dad was going to be delivering a baby. And so he's like, hey, Kevin, you can come for this. He's like, here's what's going to happen. And, he's talking about it. And so, my 16-year-old friend Kevin, a little redhead, typical redhead. Yep, I'm looking at you, buddy. Typical redhead. He goes in there and he's like, he's all gowned up, and the lady's, having a baby. She's in the stirrup. She's like, push. And he's like, this is so cool. But the baby wouldn't come. And he thought he was all prepared. He's like, I know what they'll do. They'll take it out and they'll slap it or whatever he thought. I don't know. But here's what happened. The baby wouldn't come. His dad made a decision to give the woman an episiotomy. So just like that, grabs the scissors, snip, snip, and my friend Kevin just goes, gone. So now they have 3 patients in that room, a mom, a baby, and a redhead. Did they go into, no, but that'd be a great start to a joke. They go into a bar. See, it doesn't matter what. Sometimes we think we're prepared. We think we're prepared. Some of you who have kids and you've just recently had kids, you're like, well, I thought I was prepared, but I'm not prepared. Some of you get off to school, you move out of the house, you get a new job, you find some new friends, whatever. You encounter something that you thought you were prepared for, but you weren't. And so what we need to do is we need to keep in mind the things that James is talking about here. And so there's just a few of them. Okay? One of the things that we need to do, if we think that we're prepared, he says in these first few verses, look, today or tomorrow I'm going to go into town, I'm going to make some money, but you don't even know your life. It's just here for a minute and then it disappears. We just don't know. The question is, do you know who you are? The answer is a lot of times, no, we just don't know. And so what we need to do is we need to stop being ignorant. Stop being so ignorant. Not only about who you are, but about what you're planning. So, I like cooking. I don't like baking, okay? So I brought this because every time I see one of these things, it reminds me of something where I was ignorant. I did not know, okay? So I'll cook. Give me some chicken or some beef or steak or, even vegetables. I can do that. But, give me a bunch of sugar and flour and eggs, and it's like, okay, because you just mix it up and pour it in and bake it, and you're done. Except if you're Karen, then you make all kinds of cool stuff, or Jen Stanley, and yeah. But anyhow, I was making some, I don't even know, Rice Krispie treats, okay, where you have to melt peanut butter and some other stuff together, and then Rice Krispies, you pour it in a thing, and then you melt the chocolate chips. And, different, there's Rice Krispies on the bottom and then, melted chocolate on top, and you put it in the fridge, and they're yummy, okay? I don't know what they're called, okay? It's not grilled chicken. Anyhow, okay, I had never actually melted chocolate chips before. What? Like you guys are so smart. Okay, so let me tell you, Josh, okay? Let's make sure. So when you melt chocolate chips, you pour them in a bowl and you stick them in the microwave, and you would assume that if they're going to melt, that they will change shape. Like they shape shift, right? No, they don't. They're just super duper hot chocolate chips. And so I'm like, man, these things, maybe I got to stir them up. And so I've microwaved these suckers for 5 minutes. Okay? And these chocolate chips are just sitting in the bowl. And so I go to stir them with one of these things because I want to make sure I get all the chocolate out. And I stir and I stir and I stir and I pull out this. Because this whole piece had just melted into my chocolate chips. I literally melted it off. Now, what would be really funny is if I told you I made them anyway, and nobody was wiser, but I didn't. I didn't, okay, because I thought that would be bad. I just tell the story, okay? But I thought that's how you were getting to they were ignorant. No. See, that would have been a better ending, but this was, I was a nice guy back then. But here's the point. There are so many things that we don't know, and yet we act like we know. And when it comes to our spiritual walk, too many times we think if I just get this part of my life right, if I just do these things or I don't do those things, that God will accept me, that Jesus will love me, that I will earn it. And that's not true. You are so ignorant. You're so ignorant. You're not prepared because Jesus came so that you don't have to earn it. Because the faith that works is a faith in Jesus who's already done the work. And so you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen with your life. I've shared this before. We could take a Febreze up here. Okay? And a Febreze, what does it do? You just spray out a little bit and you can see it, especially if you've been in the bathroom, you're like, oh, please work. And you spray a little bit and it masks the odor. But it's just there for a little while and you come back in a few hours, you can't even smell the Febreze. Can't smell the other stuff either, so it's a wash. But guys, your life, it's just a mist. It's here for a little bit and then it disappears. You don't know how long it's going to last. And so stop being ignorant by thinking that you have all day, because what Ralph reflected on yesterday when he posted this in our group me, for those of you who saw it, he basically said, I realized I only have so much time and I want to make the most of my time. And so Ralph had this realization where he's no longer ignorant. He's like, I want to be prepared, but I'm ignorant of to how to be prepared. I need to know that my time is short and there's nothing guaranteed. And the parents of Turner who died had shared, hug your kids. You never know when it might be the last time. Okay, so I'm not trying to be emotionally manipulative or anything like this, but this is the reality that we deal with. And so if you think that you are guaranteed anything beyond where you're at right now, you could get in the car on your way home and something could happen to you. And so I pray that you are paying attention to the fact that there's nothing you need to do other than trust Jesus for the work that he's done. So what else? You look at verse 15. And in verse 15 it says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live, and we'll do this or that. We think we're in control, and a lot of us like that. We like to be in control. Stay there. I thought you were getting up to go. Stay there. We like kids. We think we're in control, but we're not. And when we're in control, we've been around kids before. How many of you have ever had the, no, I do it? A kid wants to do something and they want to either pick out their clothes, they want to make chocolate chips. They want whatever. No, I do. You ever heard that? Okay, well, guess what? We just say it differently, but we still think it. Like, we don't see a whole lot of 40-year-olds running around going, no, I do. But we really do. We see a whole lot of us running around, and we think that if we just do it the way that we want, everything will be better. What we need to do instead should say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. In other words, we need to stop being so independent. Stop being so independent and start being dependent, not on ourselves and our abilities and our knowledge and our wisdom, but on Jesus Christ and what He's already done and His ability to come into circumstances that we have no control over. And there are multiple examples of them in this room. There's this little baby over here, Kat, who I've told you before, we didn't know if she was going to make it. And because she had a, what do they call it, intubation, she'd been intubated, she had vocal cord damage. And so here, imagine, it's bad enough that you think your baby's going to die, and then your baby's okay, and you actually get to bring your baby home, but you can't hear your baby because your baby can't make any noise. So your baby's crying like this. Tell me you wouldn't be freaked as a parent. Okay, so those of you who have been in the kid stage are going, I'd actually kind of like that. No, you wouldn't. And God has done a miracle with her. Kim is celebrating a year since her corrective surgery after she almost died with another surgery. She celebrates this weekend. Like God has done things out of our control. Out of our control. And so it's one of those if then. If the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. And so really this is all about trust. Okay? The question for you, the thing that you and I need to work on responding correctly is not being independent, but trusting, not in finishing the work. Don't trust that you will finish the work. That's not it. Trust in the finished work of Jesus. Stop being so independent. You cannot save yourself. Verse 16, as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. There's plenty of people who boast in their arrogance. You know, about the plans that they've got, the things that they've done, that they've accomplished. And what James is talking about here is when you make plans like that, you are so arrogant, so independent. And this is interesting. This word arrogant, it's only used in one other place in the entire New Testament, this particular word. It's in 1 John chapter 2. And in verse 16 where it says this, for all that's in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, it's not from the Father, but it's of the world. That pride of life is the same word here, arrogance. Desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the arrogance that you have thinking that you are better than others. As it is, you boast in that arrogance. I like how the Message says it. It says practically everything that goes on in the world, wanting your own way, wanting everything for yourself, wanting to appear important, has nothing to do with the Father. It just isolates you from Him. And so this arrogance that we have, this boastful arrogance, is when we want to look important. And some of us are going through this Christian life, or we're trying to look like we're going through this Christian life, even though we haven't given up our independence and submitted to Jesus. And we're trying to look important. You don't have to. I don't know how many times I can say this. I'll just repeat it. Jesus has already finished that work. He's made you important. So when I ask, who do you think you are? You should be able to say, I'm somebody important. But not because of what you've done, but because of what He's done. So you get to that last verse. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Guess I didn't skip it. Did I say stop being arrogant? If I didn't, you got it. That's fine. It happens, you know. So, he who knows the right thing to do and yet fails to do it, for him it is sin. So I saw a video the other day of this girl who was walking down the road. It was a closed-circuit video of the street. Okay, this girl's walking down the road. This big dude is kind of walking next to her, And this big dude turns around, and literally on the video, she's just walking, he turns around, and he just, boom, knocks her out. Just punches her in the face, knocks her out. Kind of stands over, like, oh, big guy just knocked out a woman. And then he walks off. Okay, well, you see walk into the video 4 or 5 other people. What do you think they do? Anybody got a guess? Yeah. They take out their phones. Then what do you think they do? Oh yeah, they take pictures. But then one of them notices that, well, she's out cold. There's her phone. They take her phone. And then they all just kind of walk on by. So here's this woman standing there. Gets knocked out. People walking by. Nobody does anything. He who sees and knows the right thing to do and yet fails to do it, for him it is sin. And so what we need to do, because we do this all the time, it may not be as obvious to us, but we do it all the time. But what we need to do is we literally need to stop being sinful. We know the right thing to do and we don't do it, and that's sin. And you're like, well, hey, I didn't knock her out. You're right. You also didn't help her up. So it amazes me. I mean, I could have come up with a million different stories and examples, okay? But this one just kind of caught my attention because we got kids in here today, okay? Is there any kid in here who's 10? All right, you guys who are 10, raise your hand if you think it's okay to steal your mama's car. You think it's okay to steal your mama's car? All right, guys, keep an eye on Brendan, okay? The rest of you, good. Because it's not okay to steal your mama's car. Raise your hand if you think it's okay to steal it twice in a week. No. Raise your hand if you think it's okay to drive 100 miles an hour in your mama's stolen car for 45 minutes. If you haven't heard about this, let me just show you very briefly, because this happened in Cleveland. He was bored. Hey, 10-year-olds, do you think it's okay to spit at a police officer? No? How about kick him in the chin? No? Well, that's what he did when they took him out of the car. And so, I share that story because it's really easy for us to look at it and go, oh, what a naughty boy. And yet, when it comes to living out the Christian life, there are things that we know that we're supposed to do. We should love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We should not, we can, in his heart, a man plans his path, but the Lord directs his steps. So we can make plans, but we need to understand that if the Lord wills, it'll come to pass. We need to practice forgiveness. And so there are some of us here, we don't want to forgive, we're just ticked. There's some of us here, we don't want to love somebody else because they're not nice. There's some of us here who we don't want to practice extending grace or mercy, even though we know we're supposed to, but it's like, it doesn't really apply to me. You don't understand the circumstances. Yeah, I do. And it's no different when you decide that you don't want to do what is clearly something you should do than hopping in a car as a 10-year-old, running on a 45-minute chase, going 100 miles an hour, and kicking the cop when he pulls you out of the car. Stop sinning. Just stop sinning. Who do you think you are that you can just get away with things that God says you shouldn't get away with that? I was just reading this morning about David and Bathsheba. If you don't know that story, David's the person who was considered a man after God's own heart in the Old Testament. And in the time of year when kings went out to war, he stayed home, and he's up on his roof, and he looks and he sees this beautiful woman taking a bath on the roof. Okay, that's just how they did it back then, apparently. And he's like, who is that? And they get her and bring her over, and long story short, David gets her pregnant, and then he sends her back, and then he finds out that she's pregnant, and he calls the husband home who's working for him, like one of his mighty men, and says, hey, go hang out with your wife. And he's like, I'm not going to dishonor that. My people stay in a tent. The ark of God stays in a tent. I would never do that. And so what does David do? He sends him back to the front lines with a note carrying his own death sentence, and he dies. And then David takes the woman, and the child dies. Like, okay, David knew he shouldn't have done this. He made horrible choices. How do we know that David knew he wasn't supposed to do this? Because there was a man of God who came to David, and he said, so there's this man who's a rich man, and he has all kinds of animals. And then there's a poor man who has this little ewe, this little lamb, and he loves it. It's part of his family, and he feeds it morsels from his table. And the rich man has somebody come into town. And rather than take something from his flock to feed him, he goes to the poor man and he takes his lamb. And David doesn't even need to hear the rest of the story. He gets ticked. Why does he get ticked? Because he knows what the right thing to do is. He gets ticked. He says, that man should not live. That man should not live. He should be killed. And you know what the man of God says? He looks at David and he goes, you're the man. You are that man. Stop sinning. Sometimes we need to hear this. I don't know what it is that you're dealing with. I don't know what it is that you struggle with. And I'm not here to beat you up, because you know what? A faith that works is a faith in Jesus that has done the work. And so if you're feeling guilty, if you're feeling condemned, if you're feeling ashamed of the things that you've done, you don't have to own that anymore. Jesus came to take away your shame and your guilt and the condemnation. He's taken that on so you don't have to. So stop sinning. Just stop sinning. And I know I say just stop sinning, but here's what I know. You can't if you are going to be independent. If you're going to be arrogant enough to think that you can do it on your own, you can't. You need to stop being independent, stop being so arrogant. You can argue with me, but you're just ignorant. Stop being so ignorant. These are all the things that we've talked about. So who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to be able to speak and criticize other people, to judge other people? Shouldn't be doing that. Who do you think you are when you don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, and yet you're making plans like everything's going to be fine? You don't know how long you're going to live. You're like, yeah, I'll take care of it later. Who do you think you are? Do you think you're independent? You don't know what God's going to allow. Think you got it all figured out? Stop being so arrogant. Ultimately, stop being sinful. And we do that by recognizing the finished work of Jesus, who's done what we could never do on our own, but he equips us to do what he did. I'm going to say that again. Jesus has done what we could never do on our own, but he equips us to do what he did. You can't do it on your own, but you can do it because of Jesus. You can overcome sin, you can overcome your independence, you can find whatever it is, the peace that you're looking for, but only through Jesus Christ. Everybody here is somebody who needs someone. I don't know if you know, I threw out I was thinking the other day, I threw out a question on Facebook. It's like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the name Jesus? And it's kind of funny, one of the former youth that used to go to Discovery here, he's in the Navy now up in Norfolk, Virginia, he writes down Jesus. Okay, yeah, what comes after that, Darian? And he's like, probably that I should go to church. So we just talked a little bit, and like, Jesus has already done the work. And then 30, 40 other comments. What's the first thing you think of when you think of Jesus? Peace, freedom, forgiveness, love. Here's the question for you. What is the first thing you think of when you hear the name Jesus? Because it's supposed to be good news. It's supposed to be good news. Who do you think you are? Because when I hear the name Jesus and when I think about who I am, I know who I am, but then I remember who Jesus says I am. And I am not a failure. I'm not a fool. I'm not guilty. And I see my daughter laughing at me. It's true. Jesus says, I am not guilty. He says, I am sin-free. He says, I am perfect. And he will say that about you too if you're willing to submit your life to him and trust in the finished work of Jesus. That's it. Jesus, I've messed up. I've screwed it up. I've tried to do it on my own, but I don't want to do it anymore. I trust you. If you can say that, you can feel this. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for the gift that you've given us, a hope and an identity. You've given us a name, because the name that's above every name, the name at which everybody's going to bow, is Jesus. And there's no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. And so if anyone calls on the name of the Lord, he will be saved. And so, Father, I've called on your name. I know I've screwed up. I know there's things that I should have done that I didn't, and for me it's sin. But I'm not going to be so arrogant as to think I can fix it on my own. So thank you, Father, for your forgiveness, for your love, for your grace for me, and for every other person who wants to accept that gift. I pray for them, Father. I pray that you would see their life change, that they would give you freedom and reign. In Jesus' name, amen.